Hey, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Devon Hoffman. I work with SiteSeeker. We are a digital marketing company. And so, um, you know, websites and digital and the digital space is something up our alley. And this seemed like an important topic to connect with you all on. So, before I get started, I want to give a big shout out to Andrew and the Craft Beer Professionals team. This is obviously a fantastic event he's been putting on. It's been great to be a part of this group and this community, and obviously see it grow and be such a powerful tool. So I'm happy to be able to to be here to talk with everybody today. Thanks again, Andrew, and hopefully this is something that is helpful and a resource you can use. So the topic that I wanted to go over is important, and it's something that we've seen. It's been timely in recent months or even recent years, depending which lens you're looking at it through. And it's for some people sometimes surprising as a statement or a question, and that is your website ADA compliant? Um, and so a lot of times, if people haven't heard that statement or this as a topic, it probably sounds a little odd. But for as long as there has been websites, there's been conversations and even initiatives around the accessibility of them. But in recent years, for less than ideal reasons, it's kind of slingshotted to the top of things that any business owner, but also breweries, is going to want to look at. And so with that, I thought this would be a good topic to kind of go through the what and the why of this, and then also share some immediate things that you can work on, or low hanging fruit that can kind of support where your site is in terms of its accessibility. So with that, I'll jump in here. So as a starting point, there's a couple different things you'll want to look at, and it's to answer the question, why is an ADA compliant website important? And the main thing that I really want to stress, so I'm going to stress it kind of up front, and it's why I call it out differently in this slide, is truly so that it is an accessible website for all customer types or potential customer types who could interact with it. The goal is always that your website is as accessible for any customer as your physical location is. And the reason this topic has been brought up is because the expectation is that your website is just a digital extension of your physical location. And so, as you probably know, if you've got an on premise environment, you've got to take into consideration, handicap accessibility. Maybe you have ramps, maybe you have elevators in the restrooms. You look at there's certain mirrors, sinks inside of the toilet stalls. So there's so many things you have to take into consideration on premise around accessibility. And then this is just in some cases surprising, a digital extension of that. So everything else that I go through is hopefully going to be beneficial to your website and your approach and that experience that someone can have on your website. But it really truly does root back to being customer focused and having a website that anybody with any potential disability can access seamlessly as anyone else would be able to. With that, some of these other notes in here is honestly is the efficiency of your website. And some of the things that we're going to go through when we talk about those expectations of compliancy, it lends itself to what is just a well-built, well-maintained website. The colors don't clash, where you can't read the text can resize, the website's responsive on a mobile device versus a desktop device, it's easy to navigate. All those things kind of lend back to this topic, but they also support just an overall well managed and well built website. That also kind of lends itself into the organic value. And the main topics, at least for this presentation, that I want to look at, because to me they seem like the low hanging fruit when it comes to this, are actually all things that I would be presenting you today if this was a presentation called "What are the lowest hanging fruit I can do on my website for search engine optimization?" And so that SEO, that organic best practice, actually does kind of sometimes work hand in hand with the topic of compliancy. So there is an organic value, for your ability to show up inside of search engines. You also, as we kind of drift to the right side of these bullets here, is getting into tax benefits. If you take efforts to make your website have enhancements for compliancy, if there's fees associated with that, let's say you're using a third party tool or vendor, then you could actually fall in line for some tax benefits due to the purpose of that work. And then really what's put the biggest kind of magnification on this topic is the legal expectation. And it is when business owners, or breweries in this case, get sued because their website isn't ADA compliant. And there has been, a growth in that, in the number of those that have been seen. And so this is usually where, if you're not familiar with this, this topic, or that that those are going on, you'll stop and you'll say, wait, what? We can be sued if our website isn't ADA compliant. And if you see here, this is kind of a chart that just shows you the volume and the growth of these types of lawsuits that have happened over the last 5 years or so. Obviously, the biggest jump happening from 2017 to 18. But other than pretty much staying steady the next year after, there's just been a continued steady climb over the last few years. When this was first brought back into the spotlight, and we received a number of phone calls both from clients and just people who were reaching out to understand, is my site compliant, and that kind of stuff, was around the end of 2019, the start of 2020. And it was a big topic at that time until a couple months into 2020, where the big topic that became the most important thing to address for any business shifted. And this, as you can see, the number of those lawsuits actually continued to go up. It just, there were so many more important things that were happening during 2020 and 2021 that this I think kind of fell to the back. But now again, as it's continued to climb and to rise, you can see it's the focus on it, or it as a topic, has grown. I'll speak last year, towards the end of the year, unfortunately, I received a number of phone calls, specifically from breweries, and specifically in my state of New York, who were seeing, either themselves get served paperwork around their website's compliance, or their neighboring brewery, or a nearby one, or just wanted to be prepared because it looked like they might be getting it next. So it was something that that rose, and last year had the largest number of these types of web accessibility lawsuits, which is why being able to provide some information on what to look at and things like that seemed important. And so, just to kind of again share in terms of volume, I just did a Google search for brewery website ADA compliance lawsuit, and I pulled 3 initial news reports that you can see here, and there's probably many more that you might have heard of if you were hearing in the industry that this was happening, or if it was happening to other businesses near you. But because of this, the question was posed, and this is probably the most understandable question, of saying, I don't want to run into this. Like, I don't want to have this type of situation happen to me. So what do I have to do to have a 100% ADA compliant website and I don't have to, where it's set, and now I can, move forward and focus on the things that are, that are in front of me. And so in terms of the question, how do I make my website 100% ADA compliant? The answer, unfortunately, is, in short, you can't. Because your website's ever changing. The expectations are ever changing and ever evolving. And let's say, quote unquote, you have a website that is completely compliant, but tomorrow you might make a change. Tomorrow, the technology that supports that site behind the scenes may change. Because there's so much evolution and fluctuation inside of the digital space, you can't draw a line and say, this is done, finished, and I don't have to worry about it anymore. With that being said, what you can do is make a reasonable effort towards the compliance of your website. And I want to call out kind of two words there. So outside of what I do with digital marketing, I'm also a certified tips trainer, and I'll train breweries on intervention procedures and how to address folks who had too much to drink that need to be cut off, or unruly customers, things like that. And the key term that we say in terms of what the expectation is that you're going to make a reasonable effort. And so if you can make a reasonable effort for your on-premise, then that's something that you can tie back and say, hey, listen, we did what we could, and maybe a situation, unfolded beyond it. Now, bringing that over into digital, there's a very similar expectation. We're going to make a reasonable effort that our website is accessible and, towards that ADA compliance. And that's why, to this point, and as I go through this, you'll notice kind of two different words that are shown here, which is compliant versus compliance. When I talk about this topic and, should you build content in your site in relation to it, I always do it with the term compliance, because it's an effort towards. It's not the end. It's not absolute. Where compliant is, that's it. We are compliant. The site is compliant. And unfortunately, because that kind of sets a unrealistic deliverable, I always line on the side of, if you're making a reasonable effort towards ADA compliance, that's the expectation. And so with that, what does a reasonable effort of ADA compliance look like? And that's to work within some set of guidelines. And so one of the ones that's usually looked at, especially in some of the on the legal side of things, is WCAG, which is Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. It can become a daunting list on a page if you were to look at it. You surely can Google it to see what that information all includes. But it kind of just gives you at least the boundaries within where you should be working. So then the new question becomes, okay, how do I make a reasonable effort towards compliance? Which I'll want to get into, but I want to make two notes before we do that, which is, I'm a marketer, and so my background is in digital marketing, and my background before that was in breweries, and so this is an opportunity to meld those those backgrounds and interests together to try and provide some information. It shouldn't be taken as legal advice, as I just kind of note at the bottom there. If you have been unfortunately involved, or if you are in a compliance lawsuit, it's not to say don't do the things that I'm going to go through, but it's not the end of it. It's not to say, well, I did the things Devon mentioned, so we can throw that out. We're good. If you need to, obviously can, talk with your lawyers or someone in legal, because what I'm going to share is what we've seen be what addresses that reasonable effort. Additionally, there's a number of benefits to doing some of these things. As I noted, you'll see, in terms of the organic experience and, how your site can show up on the internet, and also, for true customer accessibility. I don't want this to be scary. It's not intended to be something in terms of shock or problematic, or we've got to stop brewing and we've got to address the website. This is something that's going on, and so these are some ways, to do a self audit and look at your site and kind of walk through it and say, is this what this experience looks like? But not from a scare tactic standpoint. So with that, we can look at, okay, how do I make a reasonable compliance effort? And so I'm going to start with those things that I would align as optimization related items that serve a dual purpose of also helping out the organic presence of your website. I'll note, some of these things can be technical. I'm going to try and go into detail or show examples or really kind of iron out what we're talking about here. But if you're working with a developer or someone built your site, an agency or anything like that, you can always kind of share this information and, almost in question form, are we set with these things? And they'll likely know the answer to it. If you're, and I've had these conversations too, if you're a team of 3 and you're like, I just don't know, I'm always happy, if you'd like to reach out to jump on a call and I can take a look at your site and sort of answer these questions for you. And I'll share my contact information at the end here. So when it comes to optimization related items, you can see we've listed out 6 here, which is title tags, alt tags, which is alternative text tags, clear file naming, no text and images, searchable PDFs, and an accessibility statement. So let me walk through those. So starting off with title tags, every page of a website has what's considered a title tag or a meta tag, meta title, meta description. And it's the kind of the hidden information assigned or associated with that page that's scrolled and crawled within a search engine. And there's an obvious SEO benefit to that because that's what's going to show up in a search result for you. And so you might be saying, okay, well, what's this have to do with website accessibility? And so for these items, what I would probably say is a good sort of practice is put yourself in the shoes of somebody who's visiting a website or your website that does have some type of disability that changes their ability to interact with that content. One of the ones that we see is we'll go with somebody who's blind or has a vision impairment, and maybe they're using a screen reader that'll just read what they're seeing on the screen or what's showing up on the screen, and that's their ability to digest that content. And so one of the top level things that shows information related to the page is that meta title and that meta description. So you want it to be supportive of and a summary of what shows up on that page. I'm actually going to jump out of this presentation here and I'm going to show you a page on our website. I just kind of pulled up our brewery page and I've got a tool. If I hover on the tab here, you can see it pops up that it says Brewery Marketing Solutions and Beer Marketing Insights. If I actually go to a tool that shows me the meta information, you can see that what I just read to you is the page title. And then there's a brewery or a meta description that says, if you own or manage a brewery, you may be looking for marketing solutions to use. We've gathered data and put together solutions to help. So now if somebody was using a tool, it could read them that content and then they would know, okay, the information on this page is going to be, related to brewery marketing for owners or managers. And that's that initial look. I'm also going to show, if I jump over, I did a search for SiteSeeker, which is our brand, and brewery, and exactly what I read to you is what shows up as the Google result here. That's because that's what feeds into this Google search results. And so that's why there's that added benefit from the SEO standpoint. That's where the two match up. So that's why you want to make sure, does my, website have title tags and meta descriptions and things like that for all our different pages where people know what page they're on. The other is going to be alt tags or alternative text. And this is when you add an image to your website, the description that you would put that only shows up behind the scenes. Or in some cases, you might see if it doesn't load and you get that little icon of the broken image, it'll put the text next to it. So you know what was in the image that was there. Well, obviously, if somebody's using a screen reader, the screen reader can't tell them what the picture's of. So you would want to choose some alt text to go with that image that can. So if you look on the right here, I pulled a stock photo off the internet of 3 beers on a picnic table in front of some kegs. And so that would be a good alt text to go on that image. 3 beers on a picnic table in front of some kegs. So if you're using a screen reader and it gets to this image, you obviously can't see it, and it can read to you that there is a photo with 3 beers on top of a picnic table in front of some kegs. And so it's just one of those steps, really, regardless of what your website tool it was built in, be it WordPress, be it Square, Squarespace, Shopify, Wix, you have the ability to add alt text to an image. And so there's a benefit to do that. Now, again, from the SEO side, that alternate text that's added to that image, that's what's used to show up in your Google image results. So that's how you can pull in there too. When it comes to an image, the same goes for the file naming. One of the things you probably see or becomes a joke or you hear of a lot is when you've got like v1.jpg at the end or final version 4, those types of things. I mean, that's not a clean file naming. But also, is the file's name an element of a description of what it is? What we typically will see if you take a picture and you email it to yourself or you do it from your phone or something like that, the file name is usually like img-642.jpg. It doesn't tell you what the picture is. Or what we'll see happen a lot is if someone shares a picture on Facebook and you like it and you want to use it on your website and you just download it from Facebook, it's going to be like 30 characters, .jpg. And what'll happen is people will just download it and upload it and say, okay, we're good to go. But it's also tough for you if you want to find that image later because there's no really connection to what it is. Now, would you name it 3 beers on a picnic table in front of some kegs.jpg? No, because that'd be pretty long. But it could be, beers in the patio beers, beer garden shot, something like that. Something that is descriptive enough that then in combination with the alt text, provides that benefit. And again, switching back to the SEO side of things, that supports being able for that image to be indexed and show up organically. Then it comes to text in images. And this, for me, I think is a big one. If you continue to think in that example of somebody who's visiting your site, visiting a page, and they're using a screen reader. So I pulled a sample flyer poster for a make-believe 5K beer run happening in Texas. That's probably pretty common. If you do events, you probably do posters like this. Maybe you distribute them. Maybe it's just for use on social and you put it on your website because you're like, the information you need's in there. So we're golden. Well, if you think of that, if you have a page on your website for this event and you're like, I'm just going to put the poster in because it looks nice, I like it, and it's got all the information in it, a screen reader is not going to be able to read that. And you also aren't going to be able to replicate this level of information in the alt tag, the alt text, or in the naming structure. And so that's where you create a scenario where different people coming to your website are going to have different experiences and different abilities to consume the information. So when you have text on an image, whether it's at a large level like we typically see with event posters and flyers, or even at a lower level where it could be as a heading and you put the text in there. It's your website wasn't rendering the way you wanted, so you put the information related to what your facility layout looks like under the image and then just uploaded it. it looks just like text on the page, but it's actually text in an image, is something that you'd want to avoid. Now, I'll say you could be like, well, I really like this poster and I paid for it and I put some work into it. It's not to say you can't utilize it on the website. You'll just also want to capture this information in text form. So, using that example again, you could have this poster or this, event flyer. The title could be, 2021 beer run poster, which would make sense. And then the alt text could be information relating to the upcoming beer run. And then underneath it, you put exactly what's showing up in there, which is the same amount of content and information. And hopefully, depending on what it was built or designed in, you've gotten an email or you can copy and paste it over. Similarly, that provides that ability to have that organic benefit because now that information's searchable when before it wasn't. Another thing that we see is, if you're sharing, maybe there's more scenarios where you've got to update content that you might hold in an image on your website. One that I see is if you update your beer menus or your food menu on a weekly, bi-weekly, daily basis, anything like that. That's one of the examples that I had a conversation with a brewery on, and so I said, what could be a better solution is instead of an image that has that, use a PDF and allow the text to be searchable, as it says in this next bullet, in that PDF. But an example of that, when I say searchable, is just that if you're building it in Word and exporting it as a PDF, you're fine because then that you could actually highlight, you can interact with the text in that PDF. If you type it up, you outline the text in a tool like Illustrator, or you save it as an image and then convert the image to a PDF. It's not searchable. You can't actually pull that there's text or words in there. And so that's how it wouldn't be equally accessible. But if it is something that's searchable, it's just how you export it and that the text can still be identified. Now, a screen reader could engage with it. And then usually, at the very least, or if all else fails, or if, things slip through the cracks, the recommendation is to have an accessibility statement. And so an accessibility statement is, there's a lot of things, like I said, it's ever evolving. It's, some from day to day, things can be different. It's a end all be all where people can go to have a direct line of how they can receive information or get feedback or a response if they weren't able to find information or engage with your website the way they were hoping to. Which could bring us to, what do I put in my accessibility statement? Because what you'll want to do is create a page, and that page can just be called accessibility. Usually we'll see, the URL is your domain /accessibility, and it doesn't have to be in your main navigation, your main menu. What the recommendation typically is to put it in your footer menu at the bottom of the page. So that way, if somebody is going through pages, be it with a screen reader or some other tool, and they get to the bottom and they weren't able to get the information they wanted or interact the way they were hoping to, then there's something that says accessibility and they can click it. And now there's, a place where information lives for them. And so typically these are the recommendations we've said for your accessibility statement, which is, just, and it's almost like, the structure or the layout of it, the page is called accessibility. So that's obviously why it's there. So make a note or an outline to your, your commitment and your goal of accessibility on your site. You can call out the guidelines being followed. As I mentioned a few slides up, WCAG is one of the, the standard guidelines that there's an expectation that you'd be following. So you can call that out so that's, some of the things that I had just gone over are in alignment with that. If it does happen to have areas of inaccessibility, you can call that out. Maybe our videos, we're working on getting transcripted, and so that's in the works. And so it's not, if we go to jump to the bottom bullet, it's not assuming fault. It's not saying we've done anything wrong. There's just a place where we're working on it. But the main priority of that page is to give them a specific line of contact that's dedicated to the issue with a clear expectation of when they'll hear back. It doesn't have to be your cell phone number. You don't want that, and it doesn't have to be 24/7, because you don't, that you don't want that. What we'll see is if you've got an info at email or even your own email, you can put, please reach out to, info@mybrewery.com, and you'll expect, we'll get back to you within 2 business days. Then that just creates a scenario where, you don't have to drop what you're doing when you see something come in through it, but it gives you the ability to respond to someone. And again, all of this, if we go back up to, to one of my first slides, is showing that reasonable effort. Because again, the goal of especially that bullet is to address when someone does genuinely come to the website and is truly unable to engage with it or get the information they're looking for. You've given them a clear path to be able to provide them that information. And then the last note is not to admit fault or state that the site is fully compliant, or create something where, you're raising your own hand and saying we haven't adhered. Early on, I saw some brewery websites where their accessibility statement or accessibility page started with, "We know our website's not ADA compliant," and so it was like, pull that. You don't need to include that line, because that actually causes more problems than it helps. It's just a resource that those coming to your site can truly engage with, but at the very least also shows itself as a reasonable effort. And from there, because again, a lot of that looked at the organic element of things. And so from there, there's a question of, okay, well, what else can I do? And so that's why up here I put, speak with your website developer regarding how the site was built. So that goes back to, some of the things in terms of the efficiency we talked about. Is there, text and images, and doing, a self-check on a number of those things. And then, reviewing that as a list, and maybe implement some optimization related elements or changes that you can, that'll support both compliance and organic presence. And then the last is to use a third-party compliance plugin. And I'm going to show you what I mean by that. I've got a logo of an example here, Accessibility. They're one. It's what we have on our site. That's why I'm going to share it. I actually think I saw it on like the Craft Brewers conference website. It's one you've probably seen before. I've referred some breweries to use it. I do know that there's other ones that are free options with maybe limited features in comparison, but there is tools you can use. I'll note before I jump into it, it doesn't make the statement, "My website's 100% compliant," factual, but it does help a lot with the statement of, "I'm making a reasonable effort towards compliance." So if I jump out of this presentation and go back to our website here, in the bottom right-hand corner, you can see the little icon of a stick figure here. And you've probably seen this before. Maybe it was different colors. Maybe it was a different look. In terms of accessibility, the icons are customizable, and then the whole color spectrum and things like that can be customized to match, the look and feel of your site. But if you were to click this, you can see it pops up this, and this is a whole accessibility adjustments table. And as I click any of these, and I'll show some examples of it, but as I click any of these, the site's going to change. The page that I'm seeing here is going to change. That change is only happening and is only live for me in this one example of me making these changes. If you were to be on the same page at the same time, you wouldn't see the changing look, only I would. And it's because this is addressed by JavaScript code, a little snippet of code that's added to the site. So it creates a more interactable, digestible layout of the page for whoever happens to be interacting with this widget. The way it's set up at the top, there is kind of categories in terms of they're called accessibility profiles. So somebody who's prone to seizures or who has vision impairments, ADHD, and it'll auto generate changes that they typically would need to make given their disability. So if I click seizure safe, you can see it kind of it changed the look. This site doesn't have animation on it, or this page, but if you had a lot of animation and things like that happening, this would also kind of mute or disable that. If I go vision impaired profile, you can see it popped the colors, made it more contrast than the text, actually made the text a little bit larger. And ADHD, I can actually have a bar to scroll along as I kind of read into the content. And also at any time, if I click one of these, so I'll click here, you can see it kind of called out links and headings. If I don't remember where I made it and the page has changed and I want to undo it, up here in the top, you have reset settings, and it'll just go right back to what you were looking at. But as I kind of continue through these, you can see there's screen readers, and it'll give you the ability to do that screen reading. But if you don't want to do it at that grouping level, you can actually change the individual components as you go down. So I can say I want to make the content scaling larger. I can change the font to be more legible. I can highlight the titles. I can highlight the links. Some of the ones you get into, you can align everything to the right. And so, like I said, as these changes are happening, they're only happening to me in this example of showing this page. Dark contrast will drop the background to black and the text to white. Light contrast will do the invert of that. This is another example of why you don't want to put too much, you want to avoid putting text on images, because if the image doesn't, show here, the text isn't going to be able to change in that sense. Just you can even go down to adjusting what you want certain colors to be, for certain areas. And then that goes all the way down into even sounds. You can hide images, stop animations, like I said, the hover, as you go through, a larger cursor. So you've got all these abilities to do these things that are going to be interactive right in real time on the page. And then another element of it, as I was mentioning before, while you want to put that alt text on an image, if you're using a screen reader, their tool has AI built into it that will look at an image and generate a artificial intelligent based description of what it is seeing in that image. So if someone does have a screen reader and it's reading a page that wasn't optimized for alt text and stuff like that, it can fill it in. Is it going to go as specific as to know the brand of your beer and say that this was the fall release hazy IPA sitting on our 100-year-old bar? No. Will it say beer sitting on bar? Yeah. Would it say beers on a picnic table in front of some kegs? It could. So it's just based on what it's able to kind of see and then populate in just for the person in that experience of using the tool. And then the one last thing I'll note is inside of this tool, as you can see here, is that accessibility statement. So really built into the tool itself is the built out accessibility statement as well. So that's going the route of, also the ability to use a third-party tool, which at this time we happen to be using Accessibility on our website. So that's kind of the summary of what I wanted to be able to go through. We've got 2 QR codes up here. If you have any questions, or if you don't know, how your website's looking, or if you don't know if you can take advantage of, like I've referred to it as low hanging fruit in terms of making those changes. If you scan this one on the right, that'll be able to book a meeting with me. I'm more than happy to kind of talk through it, understand a little bit more, and take a look at your site. If you want to bypass that, you can just email me, or if you want to learn more about Accessibility, this is a link. Again, that just happens to be a tool we're using, and so the my summary of it all is going back to what I started with. There's a big benefit to having an accessible website for the true purpose of equal accessibility of all customers and potential customers who are coming to your website. Because of the cloud that's hanging over the topic at the moment, because of lawsuits that are happening, there's also an ability to address that while at the same time addressing optimization and doing some best practice on your site. So hope this was helpful. Again, another huge shout out to Andrew and the whole craft beer professionals group. And hopefully I'll see some of you for a beer sometime. So cheers, and thank you.